Welcome back, everyone. In this video, we are going to discuss getting our products up onto Firestore. What we see here is just a limited array that we have hard-coded into our front-end application. We have a larger array that more accurately reflects these 5 different directory categories that are available for products. But more importantly, the reason why you want your products not to live on the front end is because when you think about most applications, especially e-commerce applications, the data is actually spread across hundreds of thousands, if not millions of different products. It makes zero sense for us to store that on the front end because that becomes inconceivably large and arduous to work with. Also, if anything needs to change, what happens if you have to change it in the front end? That makes very limited sense to do that. You most likely want to change it in a database somewhere. Oftentimes, these products might also be split across multiple countries. Some countries might receive some products, other countries might not. By having a centralized source where you can control the data, it becomes much easier of a strategy of how you distribute that data and those products. So for us, we need to figure out how to mimic at least interacting with such a resource of a backend, such as a data API endpoint for our products. Luckily for us, we can figure out how to store that into our Crown Clothing DB, and that's what we're going to focus on right now. To begin with, though, there's a couple things that I want to discuss with you. When you look inside of my database right now in Firestore, I've currently got these categories just to show you what the final result that we're moving towards is. So don't worry if yours doesn't have it. Of course it wouldn't because we haven't actually uploaded anything there. But the main reason I want to highlight this to you is because I want to show you the general structure of Firestore. If you've ever worked with NoSQL databases such as MongoDB, this Firestore database is actually pretty much the same thing. And when I talk about that, what I really mean is that there's primarily 2 different types of databases. There is SQL databases and NoSQL databases. A SQL database you can kind of see as if the structure of what the data being housed inside of an individual collection. So if you think of a collection for us as categories, looking at each of these 5 different document items I have, what do they look like when you consider their shape? Here we see that hats contains items and titles. Items is an array that contains objects that have the shape of ID, image URL, name, and price. If you look through them, they all have this same shape. So here, even though what we have with this Firestore is a NoSQL database, what I want you to think about is that with a SQL database, this is very rigid. There's actually a lot more other additional nuances to SQL, but the main thing you want to think about is just that the shape and the expectation of what fields are present inside of every single document of one collection must be the same. So that means that every single document and categories must have an items as an array. And inside of the array, they all must have the same values of like ID, image URL, name, and price. Similarly, title must be a string. So you might be wondering, well, Yihua, in this Firestore database, if this is not in that shape, why is it that all of these still look the same? So that's actually one of the things about using a NoSQL database. While it is flexible in the sense that it's not held by that same rule set, meaning that on this set of categories, I could easily make a new document, for example, and let's say we call it something new. Let's say we call it kids, meaning that we have some kids clothes. If I save this, and let's say what I'm going to add as well is those fields on here. What I could do is I could actually add an age property, and this might point to string, and the string might say, hey, it's between 11 and 18. Similarly, I could add even yet another field. For example, maybe I could add address, and the address might be an array, and this array might contain values of the location, for example. Instead of having something like that, I could have a map. And a map you can see as an object, except the only difference is that with a map, the objects all have unique fields, meaning that you can't have duplicate fields. So in this sense, if we think about this map, the field for address might be city. So let's see in our particular case, one city is Toronto, but then I could also add another one for another different city. And that city might be New York. I can even, in this group of arrays where they're all maps, I can make a new one where the third one is a string. And for some reason, I could say Beijing. None of this matters. I can still equally save this document, and this field will live alongside these other document objects. So really, the main benefit of this is that you get a lot of flexibility. You don't really have to adhere to any kind of structure. You can just save whatever you want anywhere you want. But the problem with this is that your data becomes really inconsistent. Can you imagine mapping through this array of potentially 6 different documents, but for some reason the shape of all of these objects are completely different? This becomes extremely unpredictable and very hard to work with, which is why, despite the fact that this might be a NoSQL database and you can save whatever you want onto it, we want to be very diligent when it comes to what we're actually saving the structure of this data to be. So let's take a quick look at this structure. So I'm just going to delete that kids document that I made. Really what this is that these are just objects that contain an items field, as I mentioned, that has these objects, as well as a title field. So what we're going to do is we are going to try and actually add this into our own Firestore. I don't expect you to manually create every single document individually. That would be absolutely a waste of time. So what I'm going to do is actually give you the JSON object, and then we're going to figure out how to create some utility functions that allow us to do so. But the primary thing I want you to see is that this is the type of database we're going to be working with. So now that we know this, let's try and create our own categories in the next video. But before that, I'm just going to delete this category so that we're all starting in the same place. So here, I'm just deleting the categories. And now my database probably looks like yours. So let's get started with adding our products into Firestore.